Oh boy, oh boy. What's up, my friends? What's up, my friends? What's up, my friends? How are we doing? How are we doing today? What's the word? What's the word? What's the word? Just put this on Twitter. What's good? What's good? What's good? What's good? What's good? What we got going on? What we got going on? We are having some wine tonight. We've got a Bulgari, a Super Tuscan. And it's pretty good. It's got a little bit of volatile acidity though, which is it's all right. But as you guys know, with the Super Tuscans, they're French blends, so it's Cabernet Sauvignon. Um, Cabernet Sauvignon basically grown in Tuscany. That's basically it. And was very, very popular for a long period of time as a result of that. Drop some comments if you're here. Drop some comments if you're here. Once we get to 20, we'll start moving. As usual, I know it's late. I know it's late, but it's Holy Thursday. So we're having a big family celebration. Wanted to get this in. Um, so we'll see what the word is with you guys. Drop some comments in the chat. Drop some comments in the chat. Plaster all of these, all of the Twitter lines with it. A lot of stuff happening, and also not a lot happening at the same time. It's feels like a lot's happening on the energetic level, not so much on the physical. That's my feeling on it. But I'm gonna let you guys. Let's get to 20. We get to 20 on COVID Cabal. We're gonna start moving forward. What's up, Rudy? My man, what's going on? Drop some comments in the chat. Drop some comments in the chat. Where are we at right now? Where are we at right now? Let's go, let's go, let's go. Drop some comments in the chat. All right. Give it one more, couple more seconds, and then we'll get started with this. But if you're in the chat, drop some comments. If you're in the chat, drop some comments. So I'm gonna be honest. How are we feeling? I'm gonna be honest. I haven't been feeling so great. Haven't been feeling so great recently. Uh, Energy's just been really for me. The energy's been kind of heavy the last 2 days, last like week maybe. Last week maybe 2 weeks, but really like 1 to 2 weeks. Um, you know, I'll be real. I feel like we're in this next wave of, and this is actually I'm gonna preface this. We want the reveals, okay? We want the reveals, and the reason we want the reveals is because what we see is what's already been happening, and so there's this kind of it's a normie mindset that when something comes out that and it's like terrible, it's a terrible thing, and it comes out and you hate it. You're like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening. Well, the reality is it's been happening, and it's actually good that it's coming out, right? That's the positive. You want it to be coming out. You're happy that it's out. You should be happy that it's out. Nevertheless, we're all human, and I can tell you that as the pace of disclosures come up, I wasn't expecting to feel this way, but there's actually been a lot of frustration that's come up. And as you're saying, ARVP, I'm getting answer. Yeah, it's just this sort of sense like the corruption is so bad, guys. It's so bad. It really is worse than, or maybe it's not worse than we thought, but now we're starting to feel the level of how bad it is. And it's just kind of brutal because you feel like in the lag time between when it comes out, that nothing's occurring. And so what it feels like in the short term, in the immediacy, is it kind of feels like, well, where on earth is the justice? Because now this stuff comes out in the public and there's no answer. And this is kind of the cope. Like when it's behind the scenes, you can say, well, the Justice Department, no one's dealing with it because, well, no one knows about it or they're not getting any public pressure for it. But the impunity of seeing these organizations, just the terrible, terrible things going on. And to have it just kind of be like, yeah, we're not going to deal with it, we're not going to address it. Like, I gotta be honest, it's heavy. But here's the thing, it's going to get heavier. I know it's going to get heavier. And we're just getting started, really. We're just getting started. And that's a positive and a negative in the sense that it's a positive because more and more is going to start to come out. More and more will come out, more and more will emerge, and we will have to deal with all of that as it emerges. And I do feel like we're very close to some kind of breaking point because I'm pretty level. Actually, I'm a pretty level guy, and but there have been certain periods where I'll start to feel differently, and I'll ask myself why I'm feeling differently. And my take on it is that I'm feeling something in the collective, and it does seem like there's a lot of angst in the air. Just a lot of angst about all this shit. The inability to get the justice, the frustration of the inability to get the justice. And it's building. And I think actually, the 14th is when I think the Titanic was sunk. It was 14th, 15th. And it's, I've wondered about the significance of these dates, and I've wondered about, the fact that we have Easter coming up and what's going to happen then. Cliff talks about secrets revealed in May. We can see all the momentum going. But let's just hit some of the two big current events. Because one of the reasons I didn't jump into any of these shows is it's kind of felt like, I don't want to say same old, you know what I mean? But it's been like, Russia's gradually moving forward. All right, well, actually, let's talk a little bit about military stuff right now. Let's talk about some of the recent moves. So we'll track back. The big move that occurred recently was that Russia withdrew its forces from the north of Ukraine, around Kiev and Chernigov. So a lot of people were making a big deal out of that, but let's be honest about what the actual situation is. And it's becoming more clear, the strategy by the day. Russia moved its forces aggressively. So they had a amphibious assault feint on Odessa in the early days of the war. And then they sent troops down towards Kiev from the north. And what happened, and then of course, while these two things were going on, then you also had an advance from Crimea towards Kherson in the south, and an advance towards Kharkiv from the north, and then an advance from the Donbass militias against the line in Ukraine. Now, let's think about this from a military perspective. If you guys have the map here, it would be useful, but I'm pretty well acquainted with the Ukraine map. So basically, the bulk of the Ukrainian army is in the Donbass. And so by the militias attacking that army head on, it locks them in place. They can't withdraw from their positions, which are very fortified. So in the south, you have the units move forward towards Kherson and Melitopol, and that was relevant because that area was restricting the water supply to Crimea. Okay, and so that allowed all of the water to be able to get to Crimea afterwards. It was a massive strategic consideration. Kharkov also has it, although they haven't taken Kharkov, but they've effectively surrounded it. And then you had Kiev and Chernigov, which is kind of part of the Kiev sector. So, in what reason did they? Why would they invade that area? And and why were they so aggressive in the beginning? And I have to admit, a lot of us didn't really understand that. Why were we? What exactly was going on with this? Were they planning on just holding around the cities? Well, it's making more sense now. What they were doing was they were tying up Ukraine's strategic reserve. So this is a common misconception. Everyone presumes in this war that because Russia's a much bigger country than Ukraine, that Russia's army is much bigger than Ukraine. And while that may be true on a macro level, in terms of the combat operations, it's not true. In fact, actually, Ukraine's military is about 2 to 3 times larger than the Russian forces deployed. So Russia's actually fighting at a numerical disadvantage in this warfare. Not common knowledge, but it's about 200,000 to 600,000 troops. So what Russia did by moving aggressively on Kiev is that all of the reserve forces in Ukraine were pre-positioned or were positioned subsequently in Kiev and in Odessa. Mostly Kiev, a little bit in Odessa, to protect those two key cities. And then what Russia did while they were threatening to attack those cities is they destroyed all of the command and control and destroyed all the fuel depots and destroyed all the ammo depots. And so what ended up occurring from this at this point in the war is that Ukraine does not have the ability to move really any large scale units across the entire map of Ukraine. And so once that was achieved, Russia pulled out its forces from Kiev and redeployed them in the Donbass region. And what's going to happen there is the big encirclement, which is underway right now. And actually, when I say right now, I mean literally right now. We're going to get to the ship, but whether it's just a coincidence or not, but the attack on the Moskova cruiser, and that's an interesting thing, we're going to get into that, seems to have been the beginning of a major escalation in this war, because from what I heard just prior to this show going live is that there have been serious bombardments across all of Ukraine. So this war is going from a limited operation to a more comprehensive one. And there's a couple of reasons for that. There's been now 2 attacks on Russian territory. The first one attacked fuel depots. That was one thing. The last one, just yesterday, or today rather, attacked a village and killed 7 civilians. Really zero military significance to that. So Russia's escalating for that reason, or maybe they're escalating for the Moskova situation. The Moskova, by the way, is the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, and it's an old ship. It's from the early 80s, but it was the flagship of the fleet. It was the famous ship that had that Snake Island defense surrender, and Ukraine was claiming they hit it with 2 anti-ship missiles. Russia said it was an explosion of their ammunition on the boat. At any rate, the boat was damaged. No crew was injured at all. The boat was damaged and sunk on the way in bad weather to port. So the question here is what exactly happened with that ship. And I actually think in this case both sides are lying, although for different reasons. Ukraine's claiming that they sunk it because Ukraine's going to claim that they sunk a ship like that. It's going to be major significance. They even have a stamp that shows, the Snake Island guy giving the middle finger before he surrendered, right, of course, to the ship. But the big thing with the ship here is that from what I've seen, and I don't really have any ability to back this up because I'm not any sort of specialist in Russian military equipment, but the ship, the it just seems, from what I've understood, let's just suffice to say that the ammo just blowing up or igniting doesn't really make any sense, and the shells are not in the kind of they're not in a way that they could just blow up like that. So what you're and they're in separate parts of the ship. It wouldn't create that much damage. We can kind of rule out the anti-ship missiles because you would have had individuals in the ship die or be injured. None of that happened, and so there's a question about sabotage, and was it sabotaged in some way? What exactly happened? On the extreme level of this, you have was a NATO submarine involved with it? Probably not. Then you have more of like the suicide submarines of NATO. Was that part of it? That's more possible. Was it a diver sabotage crew, like a SEAL team that did that? Maybe more plausible. Was it somebody on the ship had been turned and sabotaged it? I think that's less likely. The truth is, we don't really know, but neither story really fits the circumstance, and maybe we'll find out. But I do think it's interesting that in the aftermath of this attack, that the Russians are claiming was simply an ammo explosion, that they have begun a massive air bombardment campaign against all of the entire country. Well, here's the other thing. And here's actually another thought, okay? And you guys know I don't think this way, but I'm actually very fair. I'm a fair individual. So let's do a hypothetical here. What if Russia wants a reason to escalate the war? What if Russia's at the point that they want a reason, a justification to escalate the war? Now, I don't know why they would claim that it was just an ammo explosion if they were trying to escalate it. But the kind of interesting thing here is that no one died and the ship sunk, which is of major symbolic value. But the other part of it is that the ship itself was not valuable. Okay? Actually, it was due to be scrapped. The new ship to replace it was on its way. It was a Russian helicopter carrier, and it's almost finished from what I understand. The Moskova was a ship from the early 1980s and was using missiles and artillery shells from the 1970s. It's a very old ship. It's not really worth anything to Russia. Russia doesn't seem to have paid much of a price for losing it, except in prestige. It brings a lot of questions. I don't really have the answer to it. But I will say this, and this is a little bit of a thing to throw in the mix. There is stuff going on behind the scenes between Russia and NATO that's very, very substantial. And the Russians seem at this moment like they don't want to bring it to the surface. But we have the whole situation in the Azovstal steel plant, right? The steel plant in Mariupol, where you had thousands of the Azov in there, and the Ukrainians sent anywhere from 4 to 8 helicopters and one cargo ship to that location to try to extricate people. And the helicopters were all shot down, so was the ship. It was damaged and forced to turn back. But there's obviously something in there very valuable. The French in particular have been making some serious, serious overtures to Russia, and there's a lot of speculation that French military intelligence or even NATO command is in that plant. And from what I understand, the Russians are now going to start to flood it, actually, to get the people out of it. It's a pretty clever idea. Because if you use smoke, you'd kill them. If you sent troops in, you'd kill your own troops. But if you flood it, they have to come out. And they don't necessarily die, right? Okay, So, Jeff, to your question, I understand the Russian desire to escalate if their goal is to hit Bialobs and Azov Nazis, and that's it. Well, I'll tell you that I am not of the opinion that the Russians only have that limited goal. I don't. I think that a lot of people in the truther community are trying to make this impression that Russia is look, don't get me wrong, I think Russia is fighting the right people and I think they have just cause to do what they're doing. But you know the old expression, never let an opportunity go to waste. Um, this is a serious undertaking. There's literally, you have to think about this not aspirationally, you have to think about this from a military perspective. There's zero, in a political actually, because at this point Russia's domestic population is the most pro-war, more pro-war than the government. So there is no rationale for Russia to be moderate in this situation. You know, people keep saying, well, you know, maybe they're going to create like a puppet, you know, they're going to keep the Donbass out and they're going to have a puppet state in Ukraine. I mean, no, realistically, they're going to take the entire country except maybe parts of Transcarpathia. The rest of the entire Ukraine is going to be controlled by Russia, one way or another. How they decide to administer it is one thing, but it's going to get carved up. And the question is how much will be annexed, how much will be puppets. But there's not going to be, I think it's naive. I think people are being really naive. The population will, at a minimum, demand Kiev in everything. I mean, I just don't think, I think people are being really naive about this. And it's not even about Putin. I actually think Putin's quite moderate from the Russian military establishment. There's a lot of people in the Russian military and political establishment that want to keep going west. They want to take the Baltics. And to be honest, I think it's plausible that they will get the Baltics because I do think that this war is going to escalate. I think it's going to escalate probably by May, but certainly by fall it'll escalate. Um, yeah, so I expect some sort of provocation that leads to NATO attacking Kaliningrad, um, which leads to Russia invading the Baltics. I just see it happening. I see it happening. I'll be happy if it doesn't happen. I'll be happy if this pulls back, but keep in mind the Baltics are very, very tiny in population. Like you invade Poland, you have a real serious problem on your hands because, um, you know, it's a very dense. You know, there's a lot of people in Poland, relatively speaking. There's about 40 million people in Poland. Finland is actually a serious problem because Finland is probably the best military in all of Europe. Um, After Ukraine, I mean, after what Ukraine has happened to Ukraine. But Finland is actually probably the only military in all of NATO that could actually do something. I mean, you can get 600,000 trained soldiers that could make a real serious bloodbath. The Baltics are nothing. The Baltics, Latvia and Estonia are like 1.5 million people, and Lithuania is 2.5 million. And 20% of the population of all those places is Russian. It's a big joke. I mean, they would not last 2 seconds. They have no force to speak of, and don't believe the chatter from these loudmouths. All the people who want the war will run, and everybody else will be left behind. That's how it's going to work, because the EU is all talk. It's all talk. I do think the Finns would defend themselves, but I can't really speak, and I think the Poles would too, although I do think a lot of Poles would go as well. But here's the thing I want to talk about. It's not even about the will, because a lot of Ukrainians really have the will. The Ukrainians have a ton of will to fight, and it's no denigration towards them. It's just more a simple mathematic of what's going on here, and the fact that, God, how do I put it? I mean, okay, I'm going to zoom out for a second. And we are going to get to Musk and Twitter. We're going to get to everything here, right? Everybody keeps talking about how NATO has the edge on the USSR by a big, USSR, look at that Freudian slip there, right? That NATO is way more powerful than Russia, and that there's no chance Russia has no chance against NATO. But this is what we call I don't want to say it's bad math, but it's not thinking about the details properly. Is the collective GDP and military size of all the people in NATO bigger than Russia? Yes, it is bigger than NATO. NATO's military size and GDP, etc., is bigger than Russia's in population of the countries. Okay, so from that standpoint, NATO is more powerful than Russia. Although, okay, but let's look at the details. So Russia has deployed in Ukraine 200,000 soldiers, and they have plenty more mobilized in the western districts if they need to use them. What does NATO have for deployed? Well, a lot of the NATO countries don't have anything. I mean, Germany has like 100 something tanks. I mean, they were doing military exercises on their tanks with broomsticks. And so there is not a real fighting force among most of the European NATO members, to the extent that they would even fight. Keep in mind, if the gas gets cut off, German industry completely collapses. Hungary is already looking to regain past lands. Turkey is completely ambiguous. Most of the countries don't want anything to do with it. France very well may have a completely different government in a week or two, because it looks like Le Pen, I've heard mixed things about whether she really won the first round, but regardless, all it takes is one incident, and that could happen very easily with this, given the war and given the tensions, that could make Le Pen win the election. And Le Pen is traditionally not so pro-NATO and is more sympathetic to Russia. Is it possible that as this thing escalates that she pulls out of NATO, that Germany does? I mean, really, the only country of any substance that you really have fully engaged in this war is Poland. But even Poland doesn't have the forces able to deal with this. And you look at the United States forces there, well, the U.S. has a couple of light infantry divisions, but they don't have any tanks. Like, the thing is, we are so in the West used to this Pax Americana world where we're picking on small little countries and we have full control of logistic chains and nobody can attack us, nobody can do anything. The Russians have hypersonic missiles. The Russians could literally hit Buckingham Palace in 15 minutes. It would take them 15 minutes for a missile launch from Russia to blow up Buckingham Palace. And there's no missile defense that could protect against it. Nobody fucking understands that, okay? NATO does not have hypersonic missiles. Russia has hypersonic missiles. NATO has minimal forward deployed units. And by the way, the United States, since the first Gulf War, really since the Cold War, but the first Gulf War was enough proximity, they don't have experience fighting large-scale combined arms conventional battles. They don't have experience with that. The Russians do have experience with it. So war breaks out. It would take months for the U.S. to be able to bring even the ammunition for their Air Force over there. They don't have enough forward deployed bombs for their Air Force if you're going to say, well, their Air Force will do the difference. They don't have enough forward deployed munitions. And then the only ground forces you have don't have any sort of heavy armory. So they're not going to be able to deal with the First Guards, the elite Russian tank groups. Okay? This is just realistic military stuff. By the time the U.S. could plausibly bring units across in a month or two, have them completely mobilized, even though they're not trained for this kind of combat, but to bring them over there. By that point, Russia will have mobilized already and deployed to the field 1 million men. Okay? NATO is not prepared for this conflict. They weren't prepared for it economically, and they're not prepared for it militarily. Nevertheless, they continue to escalate it. This is a war, from a deployment standpoint, operational standpoint, that Russia will win. Russia will win it. And they're not just going to win it because they have more things pre-positioned and they're more prepared for that type of combat, but because their population is behind it. You have over 80% in favor of the war in support of the government. You have realistically almost the complete opposite in the United States. I think anybody who's saying that Biden has more than 25% support in the US is a total fucking joker, not being serious. Yeah, they're not going to guarantee these countries security. And so if war breaks out with NATO, you're going to see people die, but you're going to see the Baltics disappear back under Russia's control because they're going to have to take them over to protect Kaliningrad. So, and by the way, I say all this stuff, and every single thing I've said right here is under the pretext of just NATO against Russia, which of course we know is not the case. Because if this war does get escalated, China will attack Taiwan. And so the US is also going to have their situation with, well, how do we deal with what's going on in Asia? And then the economic situation of the fallout with China will hit the United States, and there won't be any money. And that's where I think we're going, folks. That's where I think we're going. Now, the word on the street is that the Americans are already running the Ukrainian military, which wouldn't surprise me 2 seconds here, but that's where the word on the street is. So, that's the foreign policy front. It does seem as if it's going to be building and get worse and worse. I mean, they just overthrew the government in Pakistan, and that's going to be a very mixed message for the world because you're going to see a lot of countries get more cautious, but also a lot more resentment and hatred build. I mean, I can't even tell you how many countries are going to be spitting on the grave of this country as it goes down. Good comment here. The U.S. practically gutted its forward deployment to Europe in the 90s, and most of the Reforger exercises are 30 years obsolete. Europe is screwed if Russia invades. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we have now a coup in Pakistan. Crazy situation there. You have a very popular prime minister, and they get a couple of PMs to flip and declare a vote of no confidence, and then they get a couple of judges to say that they can't have a new election because a new election would confirm him. So the election will be in the fall, but there's going to be some chicanery, no question. So, yeah, look, we're just not really tough anymore, and there's been too much. There's been too much mythos going on, too much mythos, and I hate to sound this way. I don't even like sounding this way, but you hear it all the time from people in the military right now. I mean, there was a thread on Twitter just like today or yesterday, talking about how they're not making soldiers go through what they call smokings, right? Whereas if they make some mistake, that they have to do a ton of physical exercise, right? Tons of push-ups, pull-ups, etc. Now it's like they don't even make them do this stuff because it's, it could be dangerous for them, etc. Nah, we're people don't understand the mental component. The morale's too low. You're more likely to see those elements at the end of the day make some internal move, which I think we're looking at this happening by the fall. And I've said this to some people. It wouldn't shock me if we see the initial Q posts have a 5-year delta. Remember, that was the very end of October, so that'll be right before the midterm elections. But I'll be honest, guys. I mean, what happens if they steal the midterm elections? Right? And we don't even have to talk about, like, are they going to let the Republicans win? Probably they'll let them win if they stole them. But what are they going to... We've been really optimistic about where this stuff is going and about the fact that we are going to hit this tipping point when the financial system collapses, and when the financial system collapses, when we have this hardcore standoff with Russia and China and we lose it, that's when the dam's going to break. And I believe that. But I'm just saying, if it doesn't happen, well, it won't be my fight, that's for sure. But I I I don't see the country lasting that long. You know what I mean? I don't see it last into 2024. Certainly not before that. Beyond that, I mean, people are gonna. The anger is so palpable and it's building. You know, it's so palpable and it's building. So I guess we'll see what happens. You know, at the end of the day, it's not about the public. We don't want the public to be violent. We don't even want any of that stuff to happen. We just want people to stand in sovereignty and say enough. And it's pretty wild to think the fact, with Hunter Biden's laptop, how much more, how in the public it is, and yet nothing's happening. And this is the real crazy thing about it. It's like if you got Hunter Biden's laptop contents, the feds would arrest you for having child porn, but they won't arrest Hunter Biden. And that's where we're at as a country. That you'll get arrested for looking at an elite commit a crime. It's just wild. Jack Maxey's talking about some of this stuff, and I'm not sure how I feel about him. I don't really like people who come in and they're super doom pillars, and they kind of come out of left field. And I know he's not out of left field; he was on War Room, etc. But look, I still trust it. I still trust the plan, so to speak. We knew it was going to get bad. We knew the tension was going to get high. We knew it was going to get tough. And let's be honest, it's been not even 2 months since the Russian invasion. What kind of momentum have we had? Where are we going to be in 2 months from now? I think it's going to be really, really, it's going to be wild what we see 2 months from now. But it doesn't stop it from being painful. So then we have this whole gambit with Elon Musk and Twitter, which, by the way, a little bit of a side comment here with well, with Truth Social. I don't know about you guys. You guys let me know. Are you guys in Truth Social? Anybody here in Truth Social? Do we have any of that? Because I still haven't gotten in. And 2 of the top executives left. We'll see what happens with it. I don't want to give up on it completely, but it's seeming like it failed. That's how it feels like it failed, because there's the 2 executives leave. There's no statement about why they left. People are not getting into it. And even the people who are not getting into it, I mean, it's still only available to iPhone users, so Androids don't have access, and that's 40% of the domestic market. It is kind of a joke, and I would like some sort of explanation, at least, about what exactly is going on. I mean, if they're being attacked, if they're being cyber attacked, then just say it. Say they're being cyber attacked. So, I don't know. Yeah, is it a honeypot? I mean, I've heard some similar stuff that maybe it's a honeypot. Um, I don't like to think that, though, and I don't really know how much they even got, because most of the money pledged to them was contingent on them getting listed. It's possible that it just needs some more time, in that it has a very specific purpose. It's not really designed to compete with Twitter. It's designed to get certain information out there. I mean, we have all this stuff about how, Q was the first person who was put on there. But are they just trolling with us? Do they know that the only people who really care would be those individuals who got kicked off of Twitter? I don't know. Devin Nunes, we always know has been a good guy, and he's the CEO of it. It's just very frustrating. It's frustrating. It just feels like getting fucked from multiple sides. So we have Elon Musk trying to get Twitter, and that's like a big breath of fresh air. I mean, I can tell you, I would absolutely love that, because my account's been so throttled. It's just, It's brutal. It's like if I'm lucky, I'll get 100 new followers net per month because I have to deal with the constant drain off, and that's basically what I have to deal with all the time. Not to mention shadow banning, etc. And Elon, I mean, it would be a huge breath of fresh air. You know, the neutrally polarized guy coming in for the in defense of the world, right? In defense of free speech. We'll see if it happens. I do think he has a pretty good strategy to mess him up, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I mean, they're not going to let him take it free speech. So probably what will occur from the whole thing is that it just becomes more drama and more revelations of corruption. That's my guess, is that we just get more revelations of corruption that we already knew, but maybe the masses will start to see more of. I sometimes am still so surprised how, not up to speed they are. Yeah, I know about the 20 plus feds at January 6th. Don't have to tell me about that. Um, but yeah, it's pretty brutal, Jeff. I mean, you had the guy in New York who was known to the feds, right? It's also tiring, isn't it? We want to see, it's just like we want to see some action. We want to see something happen. And I know it's coming. I can feel it because it's always in these moments. Like, you always have to lean into the tension. You have to feel the tension. You have to feel. Once it feels like, God, how can it be any worse than this? And you feel like something's got to give, that's when it usually happens, right? Or it jacks up to the next level. But there's always a release. We know it's coming. We know it can't last. It's just, guys, I hate to say it, but we're held hostage by the normie. And this is why we have to be more considerate. Maybe I should have renamed it this, in defense of the normie. Because we don't get through this. I've realized this. We don't get through this unless the normie wakes up. Like, I knew that, but, like, you really understand it now. That it is a team effort. It doesn't matter if you were first. It doesn't matter if you knew it for years. None of you get out of it unless you work together with it. That's it. You can't break out of this prison unless you guys all work together. That's where we're at right now. My God, if Elon bought Twitter and used it for D-Class. Yeah, Trump's still hopping on about the success of vaccines. It's time to move on from Trump. No one's coming to save us, remember. I didn't hear when he said that recently, but would it shock me? I don't know, guys. It wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me. I don't even... I don't know. You like to think that there's some really big, ornate plan and every move is pre-positioned, but at the end of the day, it seems like a lot of people bumbling about, and that's war, though, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's a bunch of people trying to make the best decisions they can in the fog of war, and I don't know. The flip side, though, Trump also endorsed Dr. Oz. I mean, does anybody really feel like Dr. Oz is a good guy? He may not be like scum, but it's like, why him? Of everybody, why him? I don't know. It does get frustrating. I mean, doesn't it? Doesn't it really get frustrating? Like, we just want to see more of our people out there. But I guess it just needs more time. I don't know, guys. It's the fourth turning. There's so much more chaos to come. We'll see what emerges from the chaos. My main kind of thought here is that the system collapses, and it's just going to be hard to see what individuals and structures evolve out of it. The soft landing is the one that we've talked about with the midterms. The hard landing is going to be just a complete system collapse and tons of organic and natural decentralization where people are just like, there isn't really a federal structure to deal with because people stop engaging with it. I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. Gab and Truth or honeypots. I don't know if Gab's a honeypot, but it's never appealed to me. You know, the issue with Gab and Truth Social is that, aside from just the radicalism on the platforms, I mean, and look, I'm happy to have people have free speech. I don't think they shouldn't be able to speak or do their thing. But the issue with that kind of like hardcore, you know, fuck all the Jews, kind of like fuck all, all that kind of stuff. Uh, um, Aside from the fact that I'm not even sure if it's real people saying it versus feds or whatever, but aside from all that stuff, it's just like it doesn't add any value. It's not interesting, even aside from the hatefulness or whatever, which I don't frankly really care about. I have such a real thick skin. I happy to hear all sorts of jokes and mean comments don't offend me. It's just the fact that it's boring. It's boring, it's lazy, and I haven't really enjoyed the energy when I've gone there. Now, I do think it's better. I think there was a period where it was really quite heavy. In those early days of Gab, I think it really was like it actually kind of seemed like, and this is nothing about Andrew Torba because I don't think it was him at all, but the individuals there was really like just a super radical group. But it seems like now it's more balanced, more of just standard dissident right, a lot of homeschooling and hardcore Christians and stuff, which is fine. But it's still, to me, this is the one thing about Twitter, and I don't think True Social is going to get it either, if they got themselves working, is that what makes an effective social media platform isn't just politics. And I wish the right could understand this. You need to create, like, if they had created a platform that was designed to bring people together to have conversations about real issues, to make a new free speech platform, well, you're going to get news and commentary about political events derivatively of that. But if you just make it about politics, then it becomes like draining. It becomes, one of the cool things about Twitter is that as much as I have my frustrations on a personal level, the cool thing about it is that, okay, you get all this political stuff, but you also get like these really, interesting personal threads, people talking, even in like the dissident communities, they're talking about like, it's not just politics. In fact, often it's not even mostly politics, it's other things. I talk about dating and relationship stuff in that community. I mean, it's connected to the broader culture war, maybe, you can argue that, although my work is kind of more of a, spans a lot of spectrum. But you guys get the idea with this. It's broader, it's more interesting. It's more organic. It's not like, hey, we're going to have a counter news cycle. I don't know. Let's see here. Yeah, Elon's going to lose a lot of money from it, at least in the short term. But in the long term, it's a very good thing for Elon. He could decentralize Twitter, take it Web 3.0. I saw some guy in the crypto space talk about doing that. There is Second Earth, by the way. What do you mean by that, Andy? Please describe what you mean. 10 dimensions are real. Yeah, there's multiple dimensions, no question. Well, yeah, if Elon takes it over, it's going to be huge. I mean, it'll be absolutely huge. But we are held hostage by the normal. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going through here. Oh, I'm just tired. I've had tons and tons of crap just to dealing with. A lot of stuff to deal with. Um, but actually, up until like a few days ago, like a week and a half ago, I mean, I was cruising. It was great. I was actually not doing the COVID cabals because there wasn't really news and there wasn't anything to really talk about. But I'm bringing it right now just because I'm feeling the weight. I'm feeling the weight of it. It doesn't mean that anything's really changed in the outcome. I mean, one of the things, and I want you guys to understand this. I know you already do kind of understand it, but I just want to say it, is that you're going to feel the energy as it moves through things. You know, you're going to feel it. It's just the reality. You're going to feel it. Like, I I would never ever come on here and like there's a lot of guys who have shows and it's all this just kind of dumping. It's not going to work. Things are going to fall apart. It's not going to happen. No, I know it's going to work out. I know it's going to work out. But look, war is stressful. War is stressful. And I personally feel a lot of psychic pressure coming on recently, and that could just be a personal thing. Some of you guys agree. If you don't, that's okay. Um, you know, maybe I need a rotation off of the front for a moment. It's a lot of it's just so much corruption, guys. It's just so much corruption. And sometimes I look at myself and I'm like, how did we end up under this? It really just like takes the stuff that we've been talking about for the last 2 years, and I just feel like there's these layers we peel back of the responsibility. And I can see more and more and more how, as a population, we just haven't taken responsibility for our fate. It's just how we allowed this stuff. Little by little by little, we allowed it to come in here. We allowed the rot to come in here. We allowed the rot. Because it's like, well, yeah, this floorboard's a little bit messed up, but the rest of the board's fine. It's not going to stop you from being able to walk around and have a party. And then, oh, well, that one's rotten too. And then little by little, we're like trying to. It's like, okay, well, we can't have this table here anymore because the house won't support it. And little by little, we're just chucking stuff out. And then suddenly we're in a rotting house and there's no furniture. And you ask yourself how you got here, but there was no real maintenance. Fix up a little thing here or there, but I'm feeling the big burden of responsibility. How we as a country, how we as a world tolerated it, got into it. We are absolutely not innocent. We we've had responsibilities, and ignorance isn't an excuse. It's not an excuse. That's how it hides. So, my wife made the point that Trump sometimes does things to expose true intentions. Dr. Oz endorsement seems like he's putting him out there to be exposed. I agree with your wife. And look, I understand all the stuff with the Trump grand strategy and actually it makes a lot of sense to me. It really makes a lot of sense to me. Like I get it. I completely get it. It's, I guess it's just this. The other side is, and it's more of an emotional thing than a logical. If you have a grand strategy, you smoke out opponents. You smoke out one after another after another. I just like one arrest. You know what I mean? Let's get one arrest. Let's get something. And actually, I guess we got that guy Joe Buck, but he's like a small fish. He's like Hillary Clinton donor. It's just, look, my perspective is let's see what happens the next 6 months. I'm very much locked in for the next 6 months. I have to tell you guys though, and I said this before, and you shouldn't say this kind of stuff because it's never about like setting timelines, but We said this around the time of the election that we thought it would be fixed by the inauguration, and it wasn't. Um, but I just say it's hard to imagine any kind of strategy that takes us past the midterms, don't you think? What do you guys think? Do you think do you think there's a reasonable strategy that we get the midterms stolen, or arguably worse yet, we don't get the midterms like fully stolen. They do like a soft weak steal where Republicans win, but it's like mostly rhinos and they don't actually really do anything. What do you guys think about that? I'm curious. Do you think that's a possibility? Do you think that's a likelihood that that's a little panacea? That's the next little thing that they do in the fall, regardless of what happens with the economy, regardless of what happens militarily. They say, "Oh, it's a Republican supermajority, and we gain 60 seats," whereas in reality, we should gain like 200 seats, right? What do you guys think? Let's see here. Even if it's low numbers, won't believe it. I think it all starts around midterm. I just have a hard time with it. I have a hard time seeing how. Um, I don't know. I don't know. It just seems to me like midterms are also stress releasers. Jonathan, I think it's a good point. I think it's a good point that I shouldn't think in terms of we shouldn't think about this stuff in terms of what would be the smart move for the cabal, because we can all agree if the cabal was thinking in an intelligent way, they would be doing things very differently right now. There's a lot of ways that they could be prolonging the game. Instead, and I think it's actually in some degrees fair, they don't see a future on a gradual timeline. So they're rushing fast to be able to gain control. So they're not even thinking in terms of the stuff that they would have thought before, where they'd be like, okay, well, we can take it slower. We can slow drip this thing. We don't have to rush to the finish line with it. We can, pace them a little bit and pace their energy and move it. I think you're right. I actually think that's a really good point that if they steal the midterms, they're going to steal it big. They're going to steal it full for all of the people who they want to be controlling things. They're not going to use ambiguous assets anymore. Let's see here. Next comment from Steve. Midterms go through, rhinos bumble around, Durham drops after, and Pandora's box opens up. God, that's possible, but that's so late in the game. God, it's just like, I mean, we have, what is it, Title 42 ending in a month, and that means anybody illegal in the country is not going to get deported, basically. And I actually, there's all this stuff about the cell phones and illegals getting cell phones. I actually don't think it's that bad because everybody who has a cell phone is going to be easily targeted for removal. They're going to know every single location of every illegal immigrant in the country. And that's one of those things that they're using in their favor, but they'll probably be used against them. Nevertheless, it's it's just a lot of damage, man. It's just a lot. It's a lot of damage, and I know we're gonna have a dark winter too. I know it's gonna be a rough winter, but it would be nice to know that we're going through a rough winter, knowing that there's a good spring on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, we gotta suffer, but we know already that spring's coming. I'm I guess the next 6 months are going to tell us, right? Next 6 months are going to tell us. And actually, the next 2 months, because we got to see what happens in the primaries. In many ways, the primaries are more important then the primaries are more important than the general. I mean, they're not more important, but they're more important in the sense that you have a lot of dissident candidates that are trying to run and win in the primaries, and they'll win in the general if they win in the primaries. I'll give an example of my local Attila's gym owner, Ian Smith. And look, I don't know the details of this. I haven't asked him about it, but it's very suspicious the fact that he got hit for a DUI at this time period. And it wasn't like a DUI, like he was pulled over driving drunk. He was pulled over for some alleged moving violation. And then they were trying to make him go through some road sobriety test or whatever, and he declined. And they just said, okay, well, you were drunk then. We're going to give you an auto drunk. And this is in the advance of the primary. It's especially, a good angle to hit him on because of his past. And when he was younger in his 20s, he actually did have a DUI and he killed somebody. He spent some time in prison as a result of that. So, anyway, point of all this stuff is basically that I interpreted that as likely a hit on his credibility because he was released. It doesn't seem like anything's coming of it. But it went on in the papers, as usual. All right, let's go here. I think if they don't get things done by the midterms, you start seeing a lot of violence. Jeff, I agree with you, to be honest. I mean, I'm not like plugged into these circles. I'm not a violent individual. I've never been a violent individual. But I see stuff. I can kind of feel the psyche, and the psyche's boiling big time. And it boiled after... it was boiling before, but then, the Jan 6 stuff kind of cooled it a bit because people got a little shuddered about the whole thing. But now it's boiling, and the difference this time is that I don't think that there is... I think that people in the country... the sense I'm getting is they're not quite there yet, but they're going through the process of deconstructing their loyalty to the regime. And it's difficult because, especially if you're a patriotic individual, how can you differentiate your patriotism from the government? Especially when the government controls the military. There's like a lot of little strands here. And I'm not speaking for anybody or even for myself. I'm just talking about this on a hypothetical standpoint. I think we're seeing a lot of deconstruction of loyalty going on in those segments of the country as the corruption gets worse and worse, as they begin to realize there's no redress. You steal one election and people are super, super angry. But all their politicians tell them, well, wait till we'll get the next election. If the next election gets stolen and nothing gets done, people are just not going to have it anymore. That's just my perspective. I don't think they're going to have it. I don't know who these people are. I don't know. But I agree with you, Jeff. I think you begin to see and not just simply individuals. I think it's going to be coming from the states, which brings to the next kind of question here. What do you get from DeSantis' energy? Look, I like DeSantis. I think DeSantis is doing great things. I don't see him as the person in 2024. Look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's really quite simple. This happens as we believe with, or at least as I believe and I've talked about, with us getting to a certain point of agreement in the country, and then there being an intervention after specific events economically, militarily, that happens, and that there is a takeover again there's a couple of rests. There's a takeover again. Trump comes back, and we begin to move forward in 2023, which is a big process. We have that. Good. That's great. I think that's the best scenario we can hope for at this point. If it doesn't happen, then in 2022 leads to some degree of a mess. I think that what you're really looking at that juncture is you're looking at the beginnings of a civil war that maybe don't fully manifest till 2024, but you're going to start to see that different states already just completely separate themselves from the federal government. Texas right now, and this is crazy to think about, but Texas is negotiating with. So what Texas did is that they created massive, massive restrictions on goods moving from Mexico into Texas. And this was creating massive issues in Mexico. And so then these Mexican states started to negotiate directly with Texas, and Texas basically said, "We'll let your goods go through if you deal with the border issue." And so you essentially have a state, second biggest state in the country by both metrics, size and population, acting like a separate country. We already see this with DeSantis in Florida. I think if you see a theft on the federal level, you'll start seeing after the midterms people will give up on the federal system, and people will focus more on states, and you could end up having a civil war as a result of all that stuff. States will start to really get aggressive against other states, and that civil war will break out in the open by 2024. But in that interim period, you will start to see states essentially disobey the federal government over and over again. In the federal government, it'll be soft and soft, but it'll be more and more like that. And God knows, I hope it doesn't happen. But once that process starts, the U.S. is over as we know it. So hope it doesn't go that way, right? Let's see here. So the vibe I get from DeSantis Energy, I think DeSantis is a good guy, but the reason I went on that tangent is that I don't see him becoming president in 2024. In fact, I actually get kind of annoyed when I hear this stupid bullshit about, oh well, Trump's gonna run for Speaker of the House, or DeSantis gonna run in 2020. Just shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up with this bullshit. It's total fucking bullshit. It's not serious talk. It's political hackery. I think what DeSantis is doing is really good for Florida, but we got to get really serious. I don't know. Is it going to get solved politically? I don't know if it's going to get solved politically unless there's some sort of real protection for the election, and that people are really allowed to clean out the government, because the rot's really deep. It's really, really deep. D-class was everything, right? That's right. Could be spring 2023. I mean, I've always said that I thought Trump comes back Inauguration Day 2023. I haven't always said that, but I've said that as of the last half year. I've said that. I thought that theory was very plausible. But yeah, I think spring 2023 is going to be very good. I think it'll be very, very good. I think the winter of 2022-2023 will be really rough. So I think the spring will be an emergence from something really, really dark. What happened with Tate? I'm not gonna talk about this. It's not my business to talk about it. All I'll say about Tate, I know a lot of people don't like him. I'm a loyal person, and I appreciate him, and I support him, and I also what I recommend people to say is think really carefully about what's alleged, and think about if it makes sense or if something else was maybe going on. Because you really think that two people who do, guys who do a cam girl business, who've been doing it for years, okay? You don't think that they have contracts in place? You don't think that they have surveillance everywhere about stuff? Do you think that they're so stupid or so desperate that they would do what's alleged? It's an American girl, of course, right? It's it, I have a pretty good idea of what actually happened. Like I said, I won't say it. It's not related to that, but they there's a different agenda going on, um, and it's just an appropriate show to have that question raised. Let's put it that way. Let's put it that way. Yeah, it's false charges. It is false charges. Well, bro, I'd get drunk too. um, well, yeah, Durham's the only way. I think Durham's a big part of it, but I've heard 107 says that Durham is important, but ultimately it's the tribunals. And I agree with that. I mean, Durham, I think we have what the way it feels right now is it feels like you have this glass container and the pressure's building on it, and there's all these little like cracks that are appearing throughout the entire thing, and it's like we're gonna put some pressure here, let's put some pressure here, let's seal that hole, there's a leak, put that leak there, and the cracks just keep building, and all we really need is one big crack, and then everything shatters, all the water pours out, right? And that's what it feels like right now. It's like the pressure right now. I haven't felt this kind of pressure since around the election time before. You know? I haven't felt this kind of pressure since then. So, we'll see. Jeff, I think Shanghai is about to become a violent problem for the CCP. Well, this is actually, I'm glad you brought this up. I meant to touch on it. I don't know what's going on in the CCP. I know that Shanghai is usually the financial center and Beijing's the political center, and that they tend to alternate between the two of them, and that Xi kind of broke this, and I've heard a lot of commentary about Xi being this sort of anti-World Economic Forum reformer. The thing is, it's very difficult to tell exactly what's going on in China. We don't have good leakages from China. And to be honest, I don't really trust a lot of the videos that I'm seeing. I know at least one that they were claiming was the individuals who weren't getting food because they've been sent in quarantine again. That the video was from 2020. People screaming in the buildings. So, and we know also in hindsight a lot of those videos were also kind of like sketchy, right? So, I don't know what's going on in China, but it does seem like there is some sort of internal issue that's connected with what's going on in the external, and the shipping ports are really starting to shut down. So, are we going to start to see the real big economic stuff reveal itself in May? Very much possible. But I only feel certain about a breakdown in that department by October. And the reason is because I think Russia has been really diligent in giving a long lead up to this. And there's not major negatives for Russia allowing it to go on for 6 more months, because even though of course the energy is required for industry, etc., when winter hits, the energy is required on a lot of different levels, just for simple basic survival in Europe. And Russia can look pretty good by saying, look, we'll continue to provide you with energy so long as you pay us in rubles, and you have until basically that time to get it sorted. So you can see it's like a reasonable position, and if the Europeans don't do it, then it's kind of their loss. Although I also think that the war situation is going to escalate. I don't know. I really don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how it's going to play out. The individuals who are making these decisions right now don't know how it's going to play out. They just have war game different scenarios. And the most realistic answer for why the gas hasn't been cut off yet is that Gazprom doesn't want to be cut off yet. And there's hardliners in the military that do, and Gazprom doesn't want it to. And so Putin, being the moderate in Russia that he is probably balancing those two things. Like, well, we'll cut it off in 6 months or so, unless they pay in rubles, kind of deal. Blame the sky. Disney's a good example. Even their biggest supporters for generations are disgusted by latest events and now question how long it's been going on. What other institutions that have been seen as wholesome are really dark? I think it's totally true. I mean, if you're in like the upper middle class or low rich, the brainwashing is so much more severe because people don't want to admit it because it's part of like, it's seen bad for the class to do it. But if you're like on the left but you're in a lower class, you don't have that same compunction. It's very much like, what have you done for me? Are you respecting my needs, right? So no, I totally agree with you. It's less ideological because ideology is the purview of rich people. Only rich people can really have an ideology. Poor people are about survival. If you're more wealthy, then you can afford to be ideological because you can afford to be separated from reality. That's just how it is. I don't mean you have to be really, really rich, although it often comes from kids in those backgrounds. We all know that, the initial communists in Russia, they came from broadly university students who were coming from educated classes. And actually one of the hardest things for the communists to do in Russia was to get the peasants on board. Not that the Tsar played the hand very well as well with the peasants, but point is it was much more complicated than it's ever been made, with the proletariat. That's ideology. The proletariat didn't give a fuck. Just wanted to be left alone and do their own thing. Alright, let's keep going on here. Could be some red on red for sure. Disney can't buy customers now. Have you seen pictures of their amusement park traffic desolation? That's really interesting, Jeff, to know that it's actually affecting their theme park. The issue is, though, for all these institutions that do poorly, it's not about money anymore. I mean, they just print money. And so we will have to see some big change on the banking system across the board because you look at Elon and Twitter, I mean, he's offering shareholders a premium, but the board's going to reject it. And then a judge who's bought off is going to say what the board did was legitimate, even though it defrauded shareholders. I mean, we don't have a capitalist society even. It's not about capitalism. It's about control. That's all it is about. It's control. And if you can print money, well, you can control people because, you're not making any revenue. Well, you can get loans at no interest from the central banks. Or they'll keep printing money, and so your share price goes up regardless of the quality of your institution. I mean, at this point, it's really difficult to make a stock crash because there's so much money going into the stock market. Although maybe not much longer. All right, let's see here. Jonathan, there's a lot of dark shit that's been going on for a while that's only the insiders have been aware of. This is the year the normies being exposed to the normies. 100%. I mean, I know that Glenn Beck's team has known a lot about this, and I think we had some frustrations with Glenn Beck back in the 2016 election, but he seems pretty woke to the whole thing now. And yeah, a lot of insiders have known. It's starting to come out now. Jeff, that's a really great point. So this is exactly right. The 20 not the 25th Amendment. Is it 25th Amendment? Well, the amendment that governs term limits, and I think it's the 25th Amendment, or the 24th. Essentially, I think it's the 24th actually. Says that the president can only be in office for 10 years, essentially. And so that's designed that if you're a vice president and the president dies in the second half of your time as vice president, then you can run 2 more times. If it happens in the earlier part, you can only run 1 more time. And notably, that didn't apply to Truman because it was signed during Truman's term. So, yes, it's a perfect scenario for Trump. We've seen the predictive programming with it also about Trump 2024, Trump 2020, Trump 2030, all this kind of stuff, where like Trump's always running. But realistically, the predictive programming, and I think from a macro standpoint, it feels like you have term 1, everything's kind of set up. Term 2, he's not in office, or he's like wartime commander-in-chief behind the scenes and then comes back on the offensive section of it. Term 3 is initial rebuilding. And it seems like a pretty good legacy for him. That's about him, but you could see how this would be orchestrated. You could see how it's an element of the timing that would work out in his favor, that if he was, inaugurated in January or maybe the spring or whatever, that it would be kind of a perfect scenario for him. Because if he was inaugurated on January 20th, 2023, he'd be able to run again. And that's the longest time period that he could possibly run. So let's see here. ADV China. Hey, DM me that, Jonathan, about ADV China, Serpensa, just because I don't have any access to that stuff. I'm not sure about it. Sussman trial in mid-May, FYI, 4 or 5 weeks per Cat Harris tweet that he died. Well, I guess we'll see. I mean, I know it's going to keep coming out, guys. We know that it's not slowing down, it's speeding up. I think we're all just waiting for some breakthrough. Like, almost it doesn't matter how bad it gets, so long as we feel like there's some movement on the justice side. But the reality is that it's probably going to get a lot worse before the justice side happens. And I guess you have to just be prepared for that. Jeff, not only are the institutions getting money printed for them, they are now religious organizations. This whole thing has become religious for them, 100%. The partial term argument is being used as to why Biden isn't out yet and why they wanted for Kamala. Over my thoughts about the new Supreme Court justice. Well, look, she was the judge at Pizzagate, which is a hell of a coincidence, I think we can all admit. And she, we know about what she's done with pedophiles, given them minimum sentences. Many of them have come out and raped people afterwards. But I know that's not the real question. The real question is what happens with her. This is why this whole revocation argument I'm talking about, Q always said it has to be by the book. It's got to be by the book. Okay, well, if it has to be by the book, then what that means is that there is going to have to be a legal reason, first for the initial arrest and second for the reinstatement of Trump, and if Congress is going to have to declare the 2020 election compromised in some way. If that happens, then all of the stuff, all of the bills that were passed during that time period, it's like they're revoked. It's different than if an individual congressman was had bad behavior. If the election itself was a fraud, then fraud vitiates everything. It's almost like you go back in time. So, by that same logic, a Supreme Court justice that was brought in under an illegitimate president and an illegitimate Congress, this is the theory, right? This is the theory. I'm not saying it's true, right? But this is a theory. If that's what happens, then they would be removed. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. But I don't see any staying power. I don't feel any staying power. In fact, I don't feel any staying power with any of this stuff. I can just tell you though that it's going to get heavier and heavier and heavier. And I think it was just like a week ago, Clinton said that if anything happens to her, she would take down half of D.C. Something like that, something around those words. And of course, we know that's true because these people all operate under blackmail. The whole thing with Biden and Kamala, though, I want to say this, and we'll close up in a moment. It's been a good show. We'll close up in a moment. Kamala, you guys saw when Obama and Biden were together at that banquet. Biden looks like he has no idea what's going on. Obama's the star of the show. Kamala was really, all about Obama. Well, Kamala is Obama's puppet. And Clinton's puppets are the people in the State Department and the NSA. So Victoria Nuland, Blinken, Sullivan, right? Jake Sullivan. All these individuals are connected to the Clinton crime family. So you have these different factions trying to make deals. So Pelosi gets to control Congress. Obama controls some individuals in the cabinet and the vice president. Clinton controls other individuals in the cabinet. And Biden himself is sort of not there. And so these three factions work together. Everybody wonders, how is it that Biden has been around so long? It's such a disaster, especially with the Ukraine stuff. But I think it's that whenever somebody wants to move on Biden, Obama's faction and Pelosi's faction both want to move on Biden. But Clinton and, of course, the Biden faction itself don't want that because that's the best that they have. You put Kamala in there, then Obama controls the entire thing. So it's like the entire alliance falls apart, and then they start to go after each other, and they kind of know that. You could see if Biden falls that they're going to go after Clinton right afterwards. So it's a very delicate alliance among these thieves, and I think in the end we might see Biden stick around longer than any of us expected. I think by the end, of course, he will go, but when he goes, it'll go fast. So, in the next decade, I think AOC may become a force for getting to become tired of the gerontocracy. What do you think about AOC on the Republican side? Well, who do I think? I don't think about that kind of stuff. I hate all this shit. Man, I gotta be honest. I don't like, who's the new AOC? I get fuck all these fucking people. I'm tired of individuals who, you could say Marjorie Taylor Greene is the AOC of the right. I have nothing against Marjorie Taylor Greene. She certainly likes attention, but she stood up for some good causes. What am I going to say? Am I going to complain about that? I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to fight against the wrong people, but I'm tired of this entire circus. I think we're all tired of this fucking circus. Why can't we have some statesmen? Why can't we have individuals who actually care about the country and not about attention? You know what I mean? It's so bad that even the people who are the best are still caught up in it. And I don't blame them because maybe that's the only way to survive as bad as it's gotten. Maybe it's not what they want, but what else can they do? And I totally get it. I get it, but God, it's just like brutal. So, let's see here. But I will say this one thing about AOC, just real quick. It wouldn't shock me. I think she's an intelligence agency asset. I don't know. She's probably bad, right? Obviously, she's probably, bad side. But it wouldn't shock me if she's like a double agent. Because she's been very productive for our side at the end of the day. A useful foil. I just always had that in the back of my head. Like, she's a perfect double agent. I don't actually think that, by the way. I'm just saying that it's occurred to me that she would be. So Jeff, there's been some chatter that Nasara Jassara goes down Easter Resurrection Sunday. This would be in combo with the reintroduction of the Iraqi-backed dinar. A bunch of the dinar gurus have been alluding to this. I mean, Jeff, I just don't buy this stuff at all anymore. I think it's it's old stuff. They keep trying to push it. Charlie Ward pushes this kind of thing. We create Nasara Jassara. Nasara Jassara, honestly, is just us not being fucking taxed the way we are taxed. If we can get rid of the Federal Reserve, we're going to have Nasara Jassara. The Federal Reserve banks are the ones that are killing everybody, starving everybody. I think Kamala is a fail-safe in case Biden's dementia proves too hot to handle, then they can quickly replace his position with a cool story for the media. Well, here's the issue with Kamala. It's well known in D.C. that she wasn't born in America. And you could, say that stuff with Obama, and it was true. But the reality with it, though, was it was a much better setup. I'll just make this comment, and you guys can make your own determinations. But when that story was becoming very big about Obama, that's when they killed Bin Laden, right? I remember Trump actually pushed a lot of that as well. And it's because if you go through the whole Obama's family story, it's CIA, right? They're just a bunch of nice people in Kansas, his mother's family. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Now, the thing is, though, there's a lot of different stories about exactly what happened, and the part of the issue with Obama is not knowing exactly what real story was the story that isn't the official story. And I've heard a couple different ones, and I don't know the answer to that. I have some suspicions, but the point is, that was very well covered up, though. There's a lot of work done into it. I mean, Obama was like the Pete Buttigieg or the Dan Crenshaw or the AOC, perhaps, of that other age. And you can see how much more work they put into their little psyops. I mean, Obama was really perfect. I'm not trying to be critical in the sense of he was really good at what he did. Really good manufactured story, incredible, charming sort of personality. I mean, perfect kind of mix of white and black. He really fit the bill perfectly for what they were trying to accomplish. It's hard to get a better individual to play a role than that. But Kamala has no charm, and her background story is garbage, and it's known to everybody, and so it's likely that if she were to end up in that position, that it wouldn't even be the Republicans necessarily that would move on her, or at least not on their own volition. It would come from the Pelosi camp, because Pelosi would be next in line. And I think that's a very likely scenario. And so, and the other side knows it, so they won't get rid of Biden because they know Kamala won't really last. There'll be a brief infighting. And let's be honest here, nobody's going to fight for Kamala. Nobody's going to really fight for her. Even Obama doesn't, he wants her there, but they understand that she's kind of a failure. She doesn't have the capacity to play the role she's supposed to play. She's a disappointment. So, So it is. You work with the assets you have. All we can do is wait for the normies to wake up as the snake eats its own tail. Ben, perfectly said. Perfectly said. You guys continue to work on your finances. Continue to take care of yourselves. Continue do what you can to be prepared. You know, be prepared as much as best you can, and let's you know, look, no resistance to it. We've already made our choice. We just have to hold the field for other people to make their choice. And we want to manifest the golden age. We want to have a. Can you imagine? Like, just think about it for a second. Can you imagine what we could build without these people? Can you imagine how incredible? People are like, well, how do you get a golden age? You know, golden ages are always after the bulk of evil has been removed, because once parasites are removed, the civic society can flourish. Like, imagine if you weren't losing a third of your money every year to a place that's gonna print the money and use it for their own purposes or burn it, essentially. It's incredible to think about what we could build, and the great thing is that it's all in our lifetimes to build it. And that's what's coming down the line. So yeah, my friends, I appreciate you all. It's a good show. We'll jump on next time when there's some big stuff happening. If that's a month, it's a month. So be it. But if it happens and a lot of stuff happens, we'll be back to, twice a week. So that's how it is. Anyway, appreciate you, and I will see you. Enjoy your Easter weekend. Seriously, enjoy your Easter weekend, and love to you all.